Here's if someone wants to walk.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Bill and I have the pleasure to give everyone an overview of the National American Fisheries Society conference that we helped to coordinate. Sean Keenan was my co-chair for that symposium, and it was held in Tampa. We had a steering committee representing a variety of experts from around the Atlantic and Gulf and California states. And we also brought in Tom Frazier, who's from the University of Florida Sea Grant, who acted as our rapporteur and helped us kind of wrap up some of the talks during day one. And we had 24 oral presentations that were presented over 2 days, or 20-minute presentations. And we had 11 poster presentations, 3 of which are here today in this room, the NERDA monitoring poster, the Oriskany monitoring, and and Joe Hornbeck's work from Nova Southeastern looking at trophic isotope analysis on some reefs off of Fort Lauderdale. So if you haven't taken a look at those, we encourage you to take a look on your way out. So we wanted to look back, and the last time that there was an artificial reef symposium held at the National American Fisheries Society meeting was in 1995, also in Tampa. And well, there's Bill Lindbergh right in the center of that photo.
Hasn't aged a day.
And from that meeting, there was a special issue of Fisheries that was generated, and it focused a lot on the attraction production discussion, some issues that we still are wrestling with today. But that that work, there you have Jim Bonsack, who many of us still cite his work for our visual fish census. That work really helped kind of bring us where we are today. And it was in 2016 when NOAA Fisheries and the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission brought together 80 of us up in Alexandria, Virginia, representing the different states. And we had it was a workshop with where we broke out and identified some of the key research topics on science and research, permitting, regulated questions, monitoring, outreach, and communication. And it was from the results of that workshop that Sean Keenan and I went through and we identified what we thought were the some of the most important relevant research topics. We brought that back to our steering committee, and our steering committee helped us identify some invited speakers. So the way we kind of arranged the invited speakers was kind of starting out with some helping our participants think about the ecological processes that are involved with artificial reefs. And for that, we had John Caddy retired from FAO. And he kicked off a series of talks that followed followed on some of those theories. And then also, that would kind of brought us to a series of talks talking about the resulting patterns of those processes and different habitat types. And then finally, the management implications. Now, and of course, we kind of put these, arranged and randomly on the screen because really, it's almost like a feedback loop. We apply management implications. That's going to affect the ecological processes and so on. So do you want to add to that a little bit more in our thinking, Bill, and pulling those talks together?
Well, in watching or participating in these scientific meetings over several decades, there has been a tremendous advance in the science underpinning what we understand we're doing when we deploy artificial reefs. And so this was an effort to bring together that science from an ecological and management perspective. And one of the key things in the 2017 Reef Symposium was that it was focused specifically on the integrating with fisheries management objectives And for the first time in all of our artificial reef summits and conferences, we had the assessment scientists from National Marine Fisheries Service actually participating actively in the symposium and bringing their point of view to it. So much tighter integration of the ecological science, the practical knowledge of the deployments, and then the management considerations from the perspective of those who have to manage fisheries stocks, and not simply locations that are preferred or favored by various user groups. So this was an important kind of watershed in the development of the science underlying what y'all do.
Excellent.
So the invited speakers for the symposium, like Keith mentioned, included John Caddy, who has a very long and distinguished career. He was the chief of fisheries for the United Nations stationed in Rome at the end of his career, and he's remained active since his retirement. He gave the keynote address, which really emphasized the significance of benthic structure, benthic cover, cavity space, and complexity in the life histories of a wide variety of organisms, and how vital that is for the evolved practices and habits of managing natural mortality. We have a saying in our lab, dead fish don't eat. There's an ultimate priority for avoiding predation as well as finding food to eat and reproduce. And so John really brought that home. Chris Lowe from California did telemetry work involving artificial and natural reefs, not unlike what you saw Alejandro report on earlier today, and looking at the movement and habitat use of reef fish in a broad landscape that includes both natural and artificial reefs. The take-home message there that habitat is habitat from the perspective of the fish that the anglers and fishermen and fisheries managers are interested in. They're looking at habitat and not distinguishing qualitatively, is it natural habitat or artificial habitat, but rather what are the qualities or the ecological characteristics of the habitat that you all are providing to them, and how does that modification of the landscape affect what they do. And my work has been focused on habitat selection, which is the underlying ecological process of organisms, animals picking where to live based on the quality of the ecological resources that they value. And so Rick Klein built on that, again, looking particularly at reef structure that was designed and deployed specifically to target juvenile life history stages. And John Caddy has asserted that if there's a fisheries application with artificial reefs, it may well be in alleviating bottlenecks in the life history, and those bottlenecks are more likely to occur earlier in the life history when the cavity space becomes limiting and the fish have to either move or be subject to higher risk. So that focused on the ecological processes, and then moving into, well, what are some of the patterns that emerge from that? And in comparisons of natural and artificial reefs, that occurred in the next set of talks at that symposium, it's quite obvious that you can do the comparisons of paired natural and artificial reefs and come up with distinct patterns and say, well, they're different. The reefs are different. They don't have the same fish assemblages or the same community composition, but they're also different in terms of their physiography, the physical characteristics. So as the fish are moving around and selecting habitat, they're picking where to live. And if the artificial reefs are physically different than the natural reefs, it's only to be expected that you would get a different kind of community composition. And that's important. It may not be important for a fisheries application if you have target species, but if you're doing mitigation, and there are some mitigation talks in here, it is important depending on what the objectives for your reef project may be. But then we get into some of the work by the folks from National Marine Fisheries Service who did spatial modeling akin to what they do when they're doing these complex stock assessments, and looking at the production and mortality associated with artificial reefs and natural reefs at the scale of a fishery stock. And while they can demonstrate through their fisheries models that there can be enhanced production associated with habitat that has certain characteristics that make it more favorable for improved foraging and growth and so forth, the associated fishing mortality that comes from having those reef structures in known locations and being particularly favorable for targeting and fishing, there's a substantial increase in fishing mortality associated with the artificial reefs. And so when we think of the old attraction production question, it really becomes, is there a net gain? And according to their modeling, that is really not a, to argue that there's a net gain at the stock level, when there's targeted fishing is kind of a stretch in light of the most recent analyses. But that doesn't mean that there aren't, good, justifiable management objectives for the deployment of artificial reefs. The work in California dealing with mitigation and restoration, is something that may be of particular interest to those of you in this region. And Steve Schroeder reported on the mitigation reefs for the San Onofre nuclear power plant, which was a restoration of a kelp forest. And that was one of the most intensively studied and best designed mitigation projects in the nation using artificial reefs. And then to follow on, Dave Whitting had one that may be particularly pertinent to those of you in this region who are doing a lot of reef development for mitigation purposes, because the planning and the evaluation that he reported on really did a great job of showing how when the objective was to mimic and replicate the community structure and functionality of the naturally occurring reefs in the region, that he went through a process that set it up so they could actually evaluate, did they actually mimic what would naturally be there? And there's some interesting approaches that you might want to take a look in detail at what was presented as a way to think about what you're doing in this region. I think there's some real applications there. So, Ed Camp, unfortunately, he and his family have the flu today, and I'm sure you're glad he didn't bring it to you. But he is working on a model that integrates not only what the fish do, but also what the fishers and the user groups do to do what we call management strategy evaluation, where you can use this quantitative modeling approach once it's developed to evaluate options that you're considering to implement and which ones are the most likely to achieve the management objectives, as long as you can specify what those objectives are, or you can use it after the fact to evaluate the effectiveness of what you've done, and how well did you achieve the objectives that you set out with the design and implementation of your reef project. So, that is work underway, and I wish you could have been here to explain it in greater detail, because it's way over my head.
However, you can, thanks to a Florida Sea Grant, go online and view all of these presentations. And I really commend Scott Jackson and Becca for pulling the technology together that's necessary for these talks. It's one thing to read the papers, and in fact, we should also mention that Steve Bortone is working on editing a special book, compiling a number of these presentations. So that will be available shortly as well. But I think it's a great resource is to be able to go online, and here's the website. You can click through and view and hear it from the researchers themselves. So we'll follow up with this workshop with some more direct links and with a complete copy of the agenda, so you can use as a manual to navigate through the Florida Sea Grant website.
And Keith and I will readily admit that we're technologically dependent, so we're going to let Becca and Scott explain further how you can access this information, the various venues, that it's available. So come on down.
Our PowerPoint pulled and help you out a little bit. Thank you. we already first started working at the Artificial Reef Summit to work in streaming stuff on YouTube Live. And that's when it first came out, and we started using that. So we've accumulated many different venues and speakers from many different venues to the point that we had to start to put some organization to it. And that's what Becca has been working on here recently. And so we're going to show you a little bit about what the website looks like now. We will continue to refine that and put things in place that make it easier to find the information that you are looking for. That's what it's all about. I think the first wave was to kind of get journals and journal articles online. This is kind of, to me, the next wave, is to get practical information that you can use online in a place that you can readily access it. The other thing too, that I really like the artificial reef coordinators portions of that, because we learn a lot of stuff from you. There are things that you do that make innovation that researchers are inspired by, and that's another thing that we can all learn from each other, regardless of whether you're at the university or you're actually a coordinator in the field. So Becca, you want to show them a little bit about the website and what you've been doing?
Sure, and I'll say that this is still a work in progress. So if you guys see something that you think it would be easier to access, feel free to let me know. So on the Florida Sea Grant Artificial Reefs page, you can see we have the Facebook feed here. So I hope you all are following that page. And then right now, we're broadcasting this meeting live. So anytime we have an artificial reef workshop, we will be sure to embed it right on this page. And while saying that, it's also possible for us to give anyone else the embed code if you want any of these workshops broadcast on your page as well. You can just coordinate that with us ahead of time. So that's there. And then we also have all the past workshop and summits on this page called Workshops and Summits, so you can click there. Click on them. Wait, this was the wrong side.
A few minutes ago, the website with the where it says /artificial reefs, or you can do flcgrant.org/live when we're actually doing a live presentation. It's an easy one to remember if you don't remember artificial reefs, which you should. but you can remember live real easy, and it's easy to type in on a mobile device, and everything should work just fine. The other way is you could actually click on that live feed, and it would take you to the Florida Artificial Reef Facebook page. How many of you have followed that Facebook page? There's information right here. Everybody on that yet? Okay, so if you're on Facebook, just one click away from actually being able to interact, and that's how we're getting, those questions that actually Bill Horn asked at the back earlier. And so, when we go to other venues, like we're getting ready to go to Cedar Key in a few months, then some speakers there will be able to answer your question if you're not able to make it in person. And so it's a good way to keep up with information across the state, and researchers that, like Ed, may be able to come next time or something like that. There may be somebody that just couldn't make this venue this time, but then you would be able to receive their information at a future date or future time. And this is the Facebook web address for that. And Holly has a Facebook page for her county extension office, just like all of our offices do across the state. And so if you're in a different county besides Brevard or my county in Bay, you can go and look up your county. They don't always follow this convention. You may have to actually do a search to find that out. You can always give the extension office a call to find out where their Facebook information is located. All right, and then this is kind of just how successful have we been. We're just, now able to kind of look at some metrics and kind of do some evaluation. And so we actually, when we did the American Fisheries Society Symposium back in August, that was probably our longest session that we've attempted to do in the number of speakers, but we had over 4,000 views, and that totaled nearly 73 hours of viewing. Keith asked me how many minutes does that translate per person, and Facebook tracks 4-second views. Okay, so inside that 4,000 is probably several of those, but the idea is that there's probably several more of at least 20 to 30 people that probably sat down and watched large portions of those videos, and we're able to start to see those views come through and actually start to make an impact. You can see some of the other information that we have there. We do have some about 302 people to access the web page, so that gives us a little bit better idea of people actually going to the website where that information is housed. And then we did our Northwest District or our Northwest Florida Artificial Workshop in February. We've had somewhere around 1,000 views on that, and that was nearly just a little over 23 hours for that one. And these are some other different places that you can go look. We're all on different types of social media, so not just on Facebook, but we do have Twitter and Instagram accounts that you can follow, and if you're interested in those, you can find us later on, and we'll help you get to the right place, or send us a text message or email, or shoot us a note on Florida Artificial Reefs, and we'll be happy to share that with you there too. And then finally, the last one is YouTube. And YouTube is kind of one of the places that we're setting up to do our playlists, so that we can actually put in different information easily together. We are putting things on Facebook too, and using that as a warehouse, but the YouTube site allows us to make playlists and do some things that we can't do exactly with Facebook just yet, but it is something that if you're interested in and you don't want to go on Facebook, then our YouTube channel is just YouTube/FLC grant, and you will be able to access the information that we have there, and it makes it easy to search too. And Becca's been working on that also. I think that's everything that we had right now. Any questions that we can answer, either for me and Becca or for Bill or for Keith?
Any questions in the room?
It's getting late. No.
Well, if no one
Thank you so much.
is going to ask any questions. Since Scott and Becca just presented on social media, I'm going to give myself a shameless plug. Please follow Miami-Dade County Sea Grant on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Miami-Dade Sea Grant. With that, we are going to open up the floor. No one left. We are going to open up the floor to final thoughts or questions that any of you might like to share, questions for specific presenters, or thoughts about life in general. I'm really glad we're here too. Thank you all for coming. I know some of you had quite a trip. No questions? All right, Holly, I'm going to turn this back over to you, I think.
All right, well, I thank you all for attending today. Let's see, I'll take this and walk around. Thank you all for attending today. This workshop wouldn't be a success, of course, without all of you attending, but of course, without the steering committee. They worked really hard to create the workshop today, and I think we can give them a round of applause. They did a great job. If you have not filled out the evaluation for this workshop yet, please do. That helps us to determine how well we did today, but also for future workshops, maybe information that you'd like to see. Any suggestions like that are more than welcome, please. And for those of you who have been keeping track about the launch, it's scheduled for 3:45 right now. So you might have time to run home and watch it online if you'd like. Any comments or questions, last thoughts? Should I, Keith, do you want to just come up and say one last word? And then I think we'll be getting out a little early.
Well, thank you, Holly, and thank you, Sea Grant. This has been, as always, a great partnership between FWC and Florida Sea Grant. We really, I don't think could do it without each other's commitments to the science and the outreach on marine fisheries and artificial reefs. And I thank FPL and am I on there, really? And Palm Beach County for this great facility. It's been a great venue for us, and we appreciate the hospitality. And we look forward to seeing some high quality grant applications by our FWC due date of March 16th. So please be in touch if you have any questions on that. And we'll look forward to seeing everyone on social media and Facebook and Instagram and all that good stuff too. So safe travels, everyone. Thank you for coming.